Shomer Shabbos, baby.
Yeah, so let's talk about something that's not political. And although I'm very adamant that religious people nowadays should change what they're speaking about, right? It's just because I've made so many videos on it. You guys already know how I feel about what's going on in our society. But just how companies, factories during wartime stop making roller skates and start making ammunition and tanks, religious people at this time have to focus their attention on what's happening in the world and take a side. Because when there is no leadership, it says in the mission, a place that lacks masculinity, it says to step in and be a man. We have a world right now that lacks order, no matter what side of the spectrum you fall on. It's the job of those who instill ethics in our society, the preachers, the rabbis, the imams, to step up and give guidance. So when I see rabbis just continually teach on Kabbalah and things that have nothing to do with what's going on with COVID-19, with the riots, with the looting, I don't care what side of the spectrum you fall on, you have to speak out, okay? Because the only people who are speaking out on these things are the atheistical ones, and we already know what they have to say about it. So if there's any religious leaders out there, say something.
Please.
Not here. Not here.
Someone wants to know, Matthew wants to know, what's the difference between Sephardi, modern Orthodox, Masarti, Ashkenazim, all these different, Satmar, Chabad.
That's a long answer. All right. So in order, Sephardi Jews, Sepharad means Spain. So it traditionally meant Jews from Spain. Now, for some reason, all Middle Eastern Jews are considered Sephardi when they're really, I guess, they're supposed to be called Mizrahi Jews.
Right.
The late, great Rabbi Asher Yosef combined all their nusachs into one, just because when Sephardi Jews are Middle Eastern Jews, North African Jews, Jews from Spain and Portugal came into Eretz Yisrael, they had their own prayer books and their own nusachs, and he created one. And I think that because
he might not know what a nusach is. Why don't you explain what a nusach is?
Liturgy said, how it said. So he created what's known as Edot HaMizrach. And I think the understanding is that became the Sephardi Siddur. So anyone who uses that is considered Sephardi. So that is what a Sephardi Jew is nowadays. In America, most Sephardi synagogues encompass everything that's not Ashkenazi and everything that's not Hasidic. Ashkenaz means Germany, and that's where Ashkenazi Judaism came from. Hasidic Judaism is really a break from Ashkenazi Judaism, although it actually has its roots with the students of Shabtai Tzvi, who wasn't Ashkenazi, who was Turkish. Masorti that's what you call the conservative movement in Israel, although the Masorti Jews are a lot more traditional than conservative Jews in America. And Satmar is a Hasidic group, a Hasidic dynasty. Chabad's actually older. So Satmar, there's a split. I don't know. It's a shame that my friend Rabbi Kalikowski left the room.
How is Masorti different from conservative Judaism?
Well, the vast majority of Masorti Jews in Israel don't drive on Shabbat.
Okay.
So that's the main thing. In Israel, you almost have to go out of your way to eat unkosher to a certain extent. In the average town, although I don't think there's a Masorti synagogue in the average town in Israel, I think they're only in larger cities. For sure in Jerusalem, there's even a yeshiva. But they're typically more to the right than conservative Jews in America. They say the only conservative Jew in America is a conservative rabbi, and there's a lot to that.
Usually, yeah. I do think that a lot of the minhagim, and I do think about a lot of the stringencies. I think if you sort of push it to the side a little bit, not to say that you should give it up. I believe in the stringencies. I cover my head all the time, always, even though technically that's not a halacha. I know, I hear you. Well, go ahead.
I believe it's important. I believe it's important to belong to a community. If your community does one thing publicly, do what that community does. Don't stand out just because you happen to know more. And, but rabbis don't know everything. You could know some things that rabbi doesn't know, but that doesn't mean that it's your duty to remind him or embarrass him in front of his community. So I've known people who will listen to one of my lectures, go into a synagogue and start challenging the rabbi, and that is not what you want to do, especially if there's only one synagogue in town.
That's asking for trouble, actually, to be
It's
honest.
a hard
with
enough job to be a rabbi of a Jewish community. Heck, I mean, how are you going to please everyone in the Jewish community? Someone's always there to get pissed off. But what you don't want to do is challenge these guys. If someone challenges you, if someone insults you, perhaps you could put him in his place. But I think most fights begin with someone thinking they know more than the other person. All right. So if you have something to say, make a video on YouTube and this and that. But it's very important not to make waves in your community, especially if you're going to have kids and you want your kids to marry people from that community and you want your wife to have friends. Just go with the flow. Don't be tivrosh minat tzibor. Don't start your own cult. It's a great thing to learn with people. I don't want people to think that if you can't learn with a rabbi or you don't have a synagogue near you, it's not worth learning on your own. I think the book where you're going to learn in your life and your walk in Torah is going to be stuff you learn on your own.
But it's really an honor and a privilege for you to be doing this every Monday night. I mean, to have someone who's, in the position that you are to help us out. I mean, not every, I'm just an average guy. Most people here are average people. It's good to have someone who's learned.
I'm an average guy, but I just have a lot of experience.
You got the title. You put the years in.
The title doesn't mean anything. I mean, I could give you the tools to master Judaism, and that's one phrase most people don't mention, mastering Judaism. How do you master Judaism? Well, mastering Judaism is mastering the 5 books of Moses and what we consider halacha. That's Judaism, and that's all, and that's it, and everything else is just fluff. And the fluff is great too. Nach and Midrashim, that could add to the mix. But the 5 books of Moses, memorize the 5 books of Moses and halacha. What's halacha? I encourage people to begin with Mishneh Torah. So Mishneh Torah is the Rambam's codification of Jewish law. He went through all the sources of Jewish law. He compiled them in 14 volumes. And thank God, a Chabadnik translated it into English and put it on Chabad.org. It's free. It's in English. If you study 1 chapter a day, you'll be done with it in 3 years. You study 3 chapters a day, you'll be done with it in 1 year. That's it. Master those 2 things, and you'll know more than 99% of all the rabbis.
Yeah, she's writing it down now. Thank you.
Mishneh Torah and the Torah. 5 books of Moses and Mishneh Torah. Remember, 5 books of Moses and Mishneh Torah. That's all. Don't waste your time studying Kabbalah. People like you and I who came late to the game. I've been Jewish for 20-something years, but I converted when I was around 20 years old. I still consider that coming late to the game. We don't have time to waste studying opinion literature. As much as opinion literature could be educational and enjoyable, we have to stick with source material. Source material is the Torah and halacha. That is what Judaism is. And everything else is there to amplify those 2 things. It's also as important to live in a Jewish community and have your hand on the pulse of that community, to understand what it is to live like a Jew, to have Jewish friends, to understand Shabbat in a communal setting. This is just as important as wanting to convert to Judaism, being part of that Jewish community. Because that's going to ensure how long you're going to remain Jewish. I mean, there's people who study Torah in and out, but they're alone. And like I always say, walking with God doesn't mean much if you're walking alone, because it doesn't last. I mean, this is not the way we transmit religion to our kids. Children need a community around them. They need friends and people who are like-minded, all in unison, moving in a certain direction. And this is why, I urge everyone to move into a Jewish community. And I know it's hard because it tends to be pricey, but it's better to sell your big house and move into a small house just to have that sense of community. Now, if for some reason you really can't do it, then you know what? Build your own community. Take a room out of your house, buy an armoire, buy a Torah scroll from the internet, buy books, make a Jewish library, start advertising on Craigslist. Free Shabbat meals every week, Friday night, Saturday morning. I have a video called Start Your Own Synagogue. I made this video 15 years ago, how a buddy of mine started a synagogue in Virginia. And that's exactly what we did. And in this video, I show you where I got the bookshelves from, where I got the armoire from. We built a mikveh in the back. In the middle of nowhere. It was also in a Jewish community, but just, I don't know, because we wanted to do our own thing. But anyways, the Shabbat meals are very important. Advertise the Shabbat meal above everything. Don't advertise the synagogue. Say free Shabbat meals, experience Jewish culture and laugh, sing. advertise it like that. People will come for the food and they'll stay for the Torah learning. Okay, that's going to happen during the meal. Once you have 10 men regularly attending that meal, suggest let's daven mincha, let's daven shachris, let's daven maariv, right? And that's how synagogues are formed. Okay,
you're saying like give them a little food and then sort of push a little mitzvah on them. Yeah, okay, I get you. I dig it. I just want to say we got a troll out there in the live room, and I my spidey senses are tingling. I think it's pretty much my good friend James Larisha, who's under a sock account. He says we should watch Euro Reuven. He fulfills Torah 100%. Now, to be honest with you, Rav, when someone's saying a rabbi fulfills Torah 100%, my spidey senses go off. I'm like, didn't we do this 2,000 years ago with Yashka? I mean, my rabbi fulfills Torah 100%. What is he? The Mashiach nailed to a cross? What's going on here? I don't understand.
Look, guys, you're never going to find a rabbi that you agree with 100% of the time. But if you meet someone in the street who agrees with you 70% of the time, I encourage you to consider him your friend. And don't believe anything I tell you. Trust but verify. I welcome, if it is James, I welcome him to stay. And if he really wants to make it interesting, get your own Reuven to debate me.
Absolutely, yeah. I love your Reuven. I love Rav Yor Reuven. He's great. I love him.
He serves the purpose. I don't agree with him in terms of ideology, but he's for sure a bright person.
So I have a personal question. I don't mean to take over the room. James was scolding me. He was sending me some private chats this week and on my WhatsApp. We still communicate even though he hates my guts. He said that my Rav, and I'm guessing he's talking about you, my Rav should have told me that I shouldn't be touching my wife in public and taking photographs of my wife. He says it's against Torah. Is that necessarily true, that I shouldn't be so touchy-feely with my wife in public, that it's a desecration to Torah?
So it's socially accepted like that. In Israel, it's understood that you're not supposed to walk even holding the hand of your wife. This is more of a social practice.
I want to learn. I want to grow. Yeah, okay.
I got married when I was in Israel. I lived in Israel for 5 years, and that's the understood thing. Men don't even wear rings. There's no PDA, public displays of affection, in the Orthodox world. But that is not because Torah teaches this or Halacha teaches this. Now, clearly, we have to keep things civil, but that doesn't mean that a man has to walk in front of his wife or can't hug his wife, or that's cultural. That only applies in ultra-Orthodox communities. That doesn't apply in modern Orthodox communities. And assuming James is still a Gentile, I don't know why he's aligning himself with Haredim when he hasn't even begun a conversion process. I think it behooves him to learn the halacha and know the distinction between custom and halacha, but halacha doesn't prohibit that. Now, to a certain extent, if you're making out with your wife in public, I think is distasteful, for whether you're Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, or grabbing her butt in public or whatever. Common sense always plays a big role.
But taking a picture with your wife in public is not necessarily.
Well, clearly that's not a problem.
Okay.
If you're going to be walking around with a black hat and a black coat, and having public displays of affection could be a problem because you're misrepresenting what you look like, and that's going to confuse more people than it's going to help. Especially, I remember I had a friend once who converted from Messianic Judaism to Orthodoxy, but he was infatuated with everything Satmar. But he doesn't talk to me anymore after he converted officially and became Satmar. But anyways, he was trying to mimic everything from the Satmar community. So he took a trip from Denver to Monroe, I believe. And then when he got there, he bought a soda and he started chugging the soda. And everybody started staring at him. Why? Because Haredim don't drink from bottles or cans. They always have to drink from a cup. A soda can or a soda bottle, like 8-ounce plastic Coca-Cola bottle.
Oh, you're just saying basic etiquette.
Right. Okay. That they don't drink from it like a Coca-Cola commercial that they're chugging a Coca-Cola.
It has nothing to do with halakha, you're saying. It has nothing to do with halakha. Oh.
Custom teaches that resembles drunkenness too much. So even in Israel, it's become a practice. Like if you buy like your little bottle of juice or whatever.
Oh, because you drink it straight from the bottle because alcoholics do that. Yes, you're right.
They always give you a cup. Even in secular communities, it's become the practice, but it really started in Haredi communities. I encourage people to not be ashamed to look like the level you're on. There's many people when they jump into Judaism, the first thing they want to do is buy a black hat and a long coat, and and I think that's not a good thing, because once people find out that that's not who you really are, they're not going to trust you. So it's better to walk in, if it's with a baseball cap, if it's with even a kippah that you picked up at the door of the shul. Don't be ashamed. I mean, people will treat you nicer like this than if you walk in acting and looking like you know more than you actually do.
But there's go ahead. Sorry. There's a biblical reference for that. I mean, it says that Joseph, he's a little shmendrik and he didn't really know much. And it says Yaakov gave him the magical, colorful cloak to sort of boost his spirit. The clothes kind of make you into the man that you are. Because I sort of relate to it, because I became religious. The first thing I did was, I bought a nice black suit and a black hat. I'm walking around like a.
I think that story actually has a different message. It was that coat that hurt him and eventually got him thrown into a well.